Good evening. Thanks for being here. I haven't seen many of you for about 10 days because I had to leave town before the primaries, so I missed all the fun. Bummer. So, okay, this tonight is a presentation about the law. It's about the Constitution and your rights, and how you're giving your rights away. How you are responsible for giving your rights away, not your representative. Got that? So, I want you to take a big, deep breath. Doug covered a lot of really important stuff, but it was all political. And when you're talking politics, you're relying upon somebody else to protect your rights. You have a responsibility that you can do every day if you understand what your rights are and you know how to assert them. And that's what this is about tonight. So, do your own research and confirm or refute the things I have to say. I had a gentleman here asking tonight, challenging me on some things. Boy, you need to challenge me. What I have to say, now not necessarily during the course of this lecture. Okay, we don't want to get too off too far. So, obey all the laws at all times. Is a mandate a law? Okay? All right, so I'm going to break this down into 5 parts tonight. What are rights, and how do I establish my rights? Idaho citizenship. An Idaho citizen is a common law citizen. It's different than a U.S. citizen. The Idaho Constitution and the Declaration of Rights, which is the first article of the Idaho Constitution. Okay, Article 1. And then the Idaho Constitution is our path to liberty. And the reason it is because it protects Idaho citizens, not U.S. citizens. And then lastly, you can correct your legal status. So rights, what are they, and how do I establish my rights? What is a right? Can your representative assert your right for you? Can a lawyer assert your right for you? And the answer to that is a resounding no. You are the only person that can assert a right in your behalf. You're the only one. And what value is the Constitution? I'm talking about both the federal Constitution and the Idaho Constitution. If you don't know, then claim your rights. Did any of you have your rights violated during the last 2 years, during the COVID? I call it nonsense, okay?
Yes.
Everybody in here I think would say yes to that. But what did you do about it? And this isn't a guilt trip, and this isn't a shaming in any way, but you have to know how to go about doing it. And that's what we're going to talk about tonight, is how do you go about doing that. So you can't assert your rights if you don't know what they are. If you don't know and claim them, you can't assert them, okay? So what does an act of liberty look like? We talk about our rights, our constitutional rights and our liberties. What does it look like? Sarah Brady is a mom, I don't know how many kids, a couple of kids, in Meridian, Idaho. And on April 21st of 2020, this was, I think, 60 days into the lockdowns, into the mandates. Sarah Brady went to the Meridian playground there, play date with her kids. And this is a policeman, and we're going to play this. Now, it's silent. You won't hear the dialogue here for a bit until the very end. She's offering her hands because he says, you need to leave. She says, well, I guess you're going to have to arrest me then. This is what an act of defiance looks like. She's talking, she's civil, she's asking questions. He said, you have 5 seconds to leave, and she says, well, I guess you're going to have to arrest me. And she puts her hands behind her back and offers her hands to the officer. He handcuffs her, and he's leading her away to the patrol car right now. This is about 2 minutes to watch this. Look at all of the people, all of the observers as the camera turns. Look at all the observers. Look at all of the sheeple.
They're all out in the park.
Look at all of the sheeple.
Why was she asked to leave?
Because they had the yellow tape up, cordon off at the playground.
They crossed it.
And somebody tore it down before she showed up. And this will come on in just a moment here.
She still hasn't had her day in court.
That's correct, she hadn't. Okay, the sound will come on here in just a moment.
Dennis, you may have to put the microphone back here to hear it.
Like where?
On the projector? By the projector.
Oh, really?
Can you hear it?
Can you hear it? No, not yet. It comes on here in just a second. We'll find out here in a second. You don't miss very much. Mostly what we need to see here is the exchange. Now it comes on.
Who's filming this? I wonder.
One of her buddies.
Okay. You didn't tell me about that.
Come on, did it?
Is the volume up?
Yeah, my volume's up. Let me look at it here, see what I can
So
see.
nobody else was arrested but her.
Sometimes
She was the only one that offered her hands.
Ooh.
She was the only one that asked any questions. Don't ask questions. Don't challenge authority.
Don't challenge mandates.
Don't challenge authority. Don't challenge mandates. Don't challenge authority. We've been taught in Sunday school our whole lives to get in line and listen to authority. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Am I wrong?
Mm-mm.
We were taught in school. We were taught in school to obey authority. Right? Wrong. We were taught that, but it's wrong. When the founders challenged Britain, George III, they defied authority, right?
Yes.
Were they heroes to us?
Yep.
Yes. Is Sarah Brady a hero to us? In my opinion, she is. Okay, all right. We didn't get any sound out of that, Doug. What are we going to do?
Sometimes you have to. Well, there's that.
So, did they just make her the example? Because I mean, there were a lot of people there.
Absolutely.
We're going to ask our tech guy to come help.
What about all the rest
Come on,
of the
Chris.
people?
Here's my hero.
I can
Help me, my friend. Okay, so we're ready to go ahead with this.
We have sound on this?
Yeah, I should know.
Theoretically?
Theoretically.
You can follow.
You have to select the source. Yeah. See, it's that much, but
Thanks, my friend.
wait.
Is the volume? You know, last
thought
time
I
I
heard
heard this,
something.
What she's got,
projectors
a
made the
yellow.
volume all the way down.
Got that caution moving.
Doug's the one who turned them down.
I don't remember how to get there.
Says it's connected.
Where's the, remember how you did the volume on these?
Settings to down.
There it
Zero.
is.
Zero.
And the book, yeah.
The volume button?
Volume forward down.
Okay, we're okay.
That one, there we go. It's 0. Okay.
Our parks were opened and our playground equipment and the exercise equipment was wrapped up with tape. And I was invited to a play date and it was April 21st of 2020. Wasn't planning on going, but I was at home and I was on my computer and somebody had come to the play date and was doing a live and they showed the playground equipment and they said, someone's ripped off the tape. It's such a lovely day. All these kids are playing. And I was beckoned to the playground. We showed up. I let the kids go and play. Just a few minutes later, 3 officers showed up and started telling people to get off the playground. And I started to get a little inquisitive, as most people do when there's arbitrary rules. And I was asking why was the playground equipment closed off if we could have basketball players over here and people were sitting at picnic tables. And I think at one point me and my friends asked, if the virus dies in the sunlight, why is the equipment, wrapped up with tape? But I was never in an actual legal or illegal part of the park. And so it surprised me when the officer kept saying, or said to me, I'm giving you 5 seconds, leave. And so I just was surprised and a little irritated, and I said, fine, arrest me for being in a park because I hadn't broken any laws and I hadn't touched the playground equipment. I honestly was confused as to why he would count down to me like a child. So I was hauled off to the Ada County Jail, where they had, at that point, let out over 300 inmates from the Ada County Jail. Must have been to London moms for taking their kids to the playground. Initially I was charged with trespassing, injury to property, because they tried to accuse me of ripping off tape, which I wasn't even there for. I don't know who did it. And they eventually changed that to trespassing and failure to depart. So catching up to today's time, I have had now 3 lawyers, have spent over 20 grand on legal fees. I've had 2 trials suspended. And my last hearing, the judge set an evidentiary hearing for May 31st. And that's actually going to be in person for the first time in 2 years. So, I think I first want to tell people how thankful I am for the support. I can't believe that it's been 2 years. I would have never thought that taking my kids to a playground would have turned into such a huge ordeal. It kind of blows me away. But it's been 2 years later, and I really think that 2020 and continuing on has brought out, it's shown the true colors of people. And Lawrence Wasden is the person who's actually in charge of my case and in charge of the prosecution on that. And I don't understand why we would continue prosecuting me if I had never broke a law. And honestly, if you ask me, I think the reason it's been drug out for 2 years is because they're trying to financially bankrupt me into pleading guilty so they don't have to, in a court of law, admit that they were wrong. So, what can you do to help?
What can you do to help? What can you do to help? Join her. Don't make her the only person standing up. You want to support her? Join her. Be part of the Defiance. Be a defiant Idaho. Now that goes against everything you've been taught your whole life. You've been wrong your whole life. I'm telling you, on that point, you've been wrong your whole life. Get over it. Find a new paradigm and accept the fact that a patriot has to defy tyranny. Now there's more than one way to do it. Okay? So, we talk about rights, we talk about our freedom. That is a passive statement. And when we go to the polls, we are depending upon our representatives to cure the problem. That's a lazy solution, and it's no solution because Einstein said, if you continue to do the same thing time and time again, expecting a new result, that's the definition of insanity. We have been doing it. We did it in the entire 20th century, and now we're doing it in the 21st century. Now, the result of the last election has some really wonderful products that came of it. One of them is we have a room full of people here tonight that are interested in solving this legal problem. We have a community, right, that came out that we haven't seen that I can recollect in my whole lifetime. So, an act of defiance, like you just saw with Sarah Brady, is not passive, it's proactive. She was completely civil. She was courteous the whole time. She asked questions. Don't challenge authority, is what they're telling us. Don't challenge authority. And that's wrong. Okay, so assert your rights. First of all, know what your rights are. Then assert them and establish your freedom. And I'm going to get to a very peaceful way of doing that without even ruffling anybody's feathers. Now, those cops were just doing their job. They were probably municipal employees. They were probably employees of the city of Meridian. They're not even officers, guys. We call them officers, but they're not officers. They're security personnel for the city of Meridian. And they probably didn't have to swear an oath. I'm just telling you.
So did they have the power to make an arrest?
They do, assuming that there is probable cause. If there's probable cause, then they can ask for ID, and if you're breaking the law, they can make an arrest. They have a certain amount of discretion. There is a certain amount of discretion, okay? So, here's another one I want to get into. This guy's name is Garth Gaylord. Now, Sarah mentioned in there briefly that it was 2 years before she ever saw a courtroom, right? Did you catch that in her discussion? That original arrest took place, I think, April 21st of 2020, and as of April 21st, 2022, she still hadn't appeared in court. What about due process, a speedy trial? Why was the state delaying and stretching it out? Because she was in the right, probably. I agree with her. I think she was in the right, and she's got the right legal argument for that. But Richard Bevan, who is the Chief Justice of the Idaho Supreme Court, invoked an administrative rule in the courts that set aside jury trials for 2 years. The Idaho Constitution, if you read it, says that you are guaranteed right to an open courtroom, and it's an unqualified. It doesn't say you have to wear a mask.
Yeah, nothing does.
Say over Zoom.
Okay, it's an unqualified guarantee of Idaho law that the courts are open to every man without qualification. So, Garth Gaylord, on, I don't know the date, this was sometime in 2021, I believe. Garth Gaylord, a good Mormon boy, and the reason I say that is because he sings a Mormon song in here while he's in court. But he had the courage to go to the court and challenge. I think this is Kootenai County. And we're just I'm going to skip through a couple of parts in this and let you see part of it, okay?
So you did everything on your you put a bunch of okay, before you put a mask on, do it. You can't get them in with a mask. What do you mean? You can't come in with a mask. That's not the law. Step back out, sir. There's a paper one. Do you have a mask? Do you have a mask that blocks viruses? I think that's what we're wearing mask. Will you take liability if this mask harms me? We have a shield. You want to use a shield? Yeah, I'd rather do a shield. Yeah. Okay. See, this is made in China. I don't really care what's made. You have to wear it. Is it another or is it a shield? What's the COVID thing all about? Didn't Trump say it was attacked from China? And we're using products from China to be the solution. Okay, here's a you don't want it. Just be let out. Yes. I'll make it easier for you.
Now, he hasn't put on a mask yet. He's already in
Touched everything.
the courthouse hall. Thank you. He hasn't put on a mask yet, as you can see. He's being completely polite. He's asked some questions. Well, aren't these made in China, and aren't we concerned about China? And didn't we think the virus came from there? And these say on it that they're not guaranteed to stop a virus. Can I get something that will stop a virus? Follow that? Okay. Going on. He's so civil. He's so kind to everybody. So well-natured. Okay?
Splash protection. Put it on. This is a virus protection shield. It says splash protection. Can I get one that's for virus protection? Is this made in China too? I'm a human being.
I get that.
I'm a child of God. No, you're not treating me like a human being.
Yeah, this is Supreme Court, so you can put it on for a week.
Okay, the people made a consultation that said the courts of justice shall go with every person. Am I not a person?
You are. You are not.
I took it up on this and you haven't answered me. There's 5 guys that get to dictate the entire state of Idaho. Are you going to violate my rights?
You can put it on or you can leave.
I just found it used in the law library.
We don't have a law library here. We went out a long time ago.
Oh.
So that's what you want is not here. So now you put it on after you took it off, we'll not put it that long.
Why?
Supreme Court orders.
So they can just order anything? So when they're already violating my rights, how is that legal? How is that law?
He's being non-compliant. He's being non-compliant. He's not wearing a face shield or a mask. He's not following the rules.
He's not wearing a mask all the time?
Well, I'm not charged with governor.
Yeah, the sheriff. I was just in a meeting with the sheriffs, and the sheriffs didn't have masks on in a commissioner meeting.
That's fine. They're not governed by the Supreme Court of Idaho.
So COVID only comes in the courthouse? This is the only place that COVID comes?
Okay. Put it on and we'll have permanent police escort you.
I just want to do it.
Right now, this is your option. You want to put this police company and get a ticket for trespassing?
Why would I want them to do that?
Then you have to put your shield on or call them right now. Your choice. Dude, you don't want this trouble, man. You don't want this trouble.
I want
This isn't the place where you make your stand. You can call the Supreme Court.
Not the lawyer.
I called the Supreme Court yesterday and nobody answered.
Giving him legal advice.
Again, but either put it on or I'm gonna call the cops.
Did you guys know the Supreme Court suspended jury trials? How many people are sitting in jail separated from their families, sitting in a cell, and they haven't even had a chance to defend themselves in court? From September to December, people have been sitting in jail, unconvicted, because these 5 Supreme Court justices.
All right, I'm gonna call the police and you're gonna get a ticket. You don't want this trouble, man. Just get out of here. You can save yourself some trouble if you just put it on.
Just submit to tyranny. All you have to do is submit to tyranny. And you get your rights
This is
back.
Pete Barnes, the
You get your rights back.
Chief
Submit
Bailiff
to
at the
tyranny.
courthouse. I have a person that we need trespassed out of the Justice Building. 324 West Garden
Are you
Avenue.
guys zombies? Forcing masks on people? You think is good?
Oh, I don't think it's good.
Saying segregation is good, huh? You You guys, we have a holiday called Martin Luther King Jr. Day. He broke the rules because there was segregation. This is segregation. You're saying because I don't believe in the mask, I'm not allowed in here.
He doesn't have any influence on our
Don't you guys celebrate Martin? The federal government celebrates Martin Luther King Jr., who got arrested over 30 times for breaking the rules, like this rule, segregation rules. Rosa Parks got arrested on a bus. Are you guys gonna tell, hey, Rosa Parks picked the wrong battle?
Thanks for educating my kid while she's in school.
Kids should know this, that every human being is a child of God.
Not everything is rebellion.
Okay, I've petitioned the legislature failed. This has been going on almost 2 years. I petitioned the governor failed. I've tried every remedy. I've been trying every remedy for 2 years. Rosa Parks in it is the only way. I need all of you to make a stand, take off your masks. It's the only way we're gonna get free. Let's restore the rule of law and the Constitution. There is no law against masks.
I don't.
The Supreme Court doesn't write laws.
You're fighting the wrong mother. You gotta go do the right way.
What's the right way?
The right way is not fighting these people who are doing their job.
I'm not fighting anybody. I'm trying to tell everyone to take off your mask and be free. If you don't want to wear a mask, don't wear one. That's all I'm saying. If you want to wear one, go ahead.
Look, I'm not for masks, but
I'm not going to kick you out for wearing a mask.
they ain't got the authority. So you should listen.
They have no authority to require masks. Okay, authority comes, government authority always has to be a just power by the consent of the governed. Whenever did the governed consent to this? Did the legislature? It was 5 men in a room who just wrote it on a piece of paper. Our representatives in the legislature weren't even consulted about this. Praise to the man who commune with Jehovah, Jesus anointed the prophet and seer. Blessed hope in the last dispensation, King shall extol in the nations reborn. Hail to the prophet ascended to heaven, traitors and tyrants, now fight him in vain. I got some laughs, yeah, some smiles. He's getting laughing too. Yeah, it's good. You're laughing, I can tell. It's hard to tell. 'Cause it's my eyes. Let's see.
Pokemon thing with the board.
Is this love? Is this love that I'm feeling? Is this love? Is this love? Is this love? Is this love that I'm feeling? Whoa. That hurts my arms. Ow. I'm not resisting.
Garth Gaylord. That's what it looks like to assert your rights. Your lawyer can't do it for you. And if your representatives fail to do it for you, you must do it yourself. Well, actually, the representatives can't assert your rights either. But if they fail to do their job in protecting your rights from the position of power they have, then the responsibility falls to me. Okay. So, Garth, as he mentioned, had previously requested. Now, it's called an administrative demand. You send a letter to the agency or the authority in charge of the violation of your rights. You send an administrative demand to that person, a letter demanding that they perform their duty in their office and honor your rights, that they comply with the provisions of the Constitution. That's how that's done. Having defied the mandate, as he did in this picture now, he now has standing to sue. Did you hear the other people telling him, this isn't the way you do this? They're wrong. They're wrong. This is how you do it. If Rosa Parks hadn't gotten on the bus in 1955, I think it was December 1st, 1955 or thereabouts, if she hadn't got on the bus, it could have never gone to the Supreme Court. The only way that you get a ride to the Supreme Court is if you have standing. And standing is established when an authority violates your rights. And the only way to get them to violate your rights is to defy their order. I don't want to get distracted here too much. You have a question?
I just wondered why he was there. I missed why he was at the courthouse.
Oh, because the courthouse they had closed the courthouse's trials for almost 2 years, in person. The Idaho Constitution guarantees in-person trials, and that the courthouse, if you look at your Constitution, Idaho Constitution, that the courts of justice are open to all men. Didn't say only those with masks on.
But what reasoning was he there? What was he there to do, I guess?
Doesn't matter.
Okay.
The courthouse is open to him. I don't know exactly. I don't really know. But do you know that Title 46 of the Idaho Code, Title 46 is the emergency powers provision of the Idaho Code. The Idaho Code means our laws, our Idaho laws. Title 46 is the statute in the Idaho Code that gives the governor authority to invoke emergency powers. Did you know that? It's based on Article 14 of the Idaho Constitution, which is the militia article. It's a military provision in a state of an emergency. This was a COVID thing, wasn't it? I don't remember the militia being called out. Now, he did have authority, and he did authorize and maybe even use the National Guard for some of the management of some of the COVID facilities. That may have been the case, but it was under Title 46, or Title 46, Article 14. So, having defied the mandate, Garth now has standing to sue for discrimination. So, during the COVID thing, we had lots of employees at the INL and elsewhere that were filing for exemptions under Title 42 of the U.S. Code, which is to protect them from having to take the vaccine. They were doing that under Title 42. That's an exemption. An exemption means that there is a law that covers everybody in this room, but you're going to ask for an exemption. In other words, the law really does operate on you, but I'm going to ask you to exempt me. You're going to give me an exception, okay? A request for exemption is an act of fealty. Under feudal law, the king is the lord of the land, and you're going to kneel down before him and pray for his mercy to exempt you from a requirement. Fealty is the fidelity of a vassal or a feudal tenant to his lord. Okay? So, at the bottom here you can see Garth Gaylord and you can see Sarah Brady. Boy, they look like criminals, don't they? And you know about James O'Keefe and Project Veritas and all that happened there. And there's Rosa Parks. And Rosa Parks is one of my heroes. And you know that she worked for the ACLU?
Wow.
And it was the ACLU that covered the legal expenses to do that. And the Jewish population is a strong supporter of the ACLU. And a lot of them are very conservative, very pro-family, very conservative in their views. And I asked one who I was working with once, why is it that the Jewish community supports the ACLU so strongly? And the response was, what goes around comes around. When I protect a black man, it protects me. What goes around comes around. When we try to pass laws, now I hear people talking about concerns about crossover voting in the election, in the primary. I don't have a solution to that other than to say I think we should do away with the two-party system. Okay, that's the problem. Is that we've created two parties that funnel everybody into one of these two powerful parties so that they can be controlled leading up to the general election. That's the problem.
Our founders never intended for that.
Never intended for that. Very partisan politics. In fact, they were very wary of it. If you read the Federalist papers, they argued against that.
It divides the people.
Yes. So in 1776, we had the Patriots who were carrying their muskets. And up above that, we have Scott Smith and John Teagues, who were in Loudon, Virginia. These two men's daughters were attacked by a transgender in a restroom at different times, but it was the same transgender boy. Can I say that?
Yeah. Right.
All right. So you have to be a belligerent claimant in person. A belligerent claimant in person. Now, we think of the word as belligerent as being sassy and mouthy and nasty. That's not what it means. It means that I'm going to stand my ground, you're going to tell me what I need to do, and I'm going to refuse to do it. I'm going to do it politely, I'm going to do it respectfully, you know, but I'm going to refuse to do it. That's called a belligerent claimant in person. So, all of these people's acts or defiance of authority is the machinery of freedom. It is the very machinery of freedom. And if we just go along to get along, we're not going to be free. And that's the reason we're losing our freedoms, is because we don't understand this very important principle that we can't leave it to somebody else. You have to do it yourself. So, it is not the critic who counts. This is Theodore Roosevelt. This was in a speech he gave in Paris in 1918. It is not the critic who counts. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at best knows the triumph of achievement, and who, if he fails, fails while daring greatly. So that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat. Now, how do you think the day would have gone for Sarah Brady if the other 50, 60 people in that playground had walked onto the playground too?
Yeah.
How would that day have ended differently?
They couldn't have taken them all in.
And how would the day, they don't have the force to do it even.
Exactly.
Nor do they have the willingness to do it. They're sheeple too. The police are sheeple too, okay? Now, what about when Garth Gaylord walked into the courthouse? What if everybody else on that bench had taken off their mask?
Exactly.
They wouldn't have known what to do with them.
Was that the only one in church with no mask on?
But the key here is knowing what your rights are. Knowing the difference between a law and a suggestion.
And don't think it's just somewhere else. I took my mother to Rosemark, and they said, you have to have a mask to be vaccinated. I said, no, I don't. And they fought with me, and I said, you put me in a room then, because she has an appointment, she's going to have that appointment. And they put us both in the room, and the doctor came in and said, I'm sorry, I agree, you have the rights not to do these things. Because they were arguing, I said, I will not be vaccinated, and you can't make me be vaccinated, and I won't wear a mask.
That was very well put. What she just said was, she went to Rosemark to get somebody a vaccine, and she said, I'm not going to put on a mask, and I'm not good, and I have a right not to be vaccinated. She defied them, and that's what you have to do. Okay? Thank you.
It wasn't fun, but
It isn't fun. No, it isn't fun.
I mean, they really acted like they hate me.
But how do you feel now about it?
You know, it's like, yeah, whatever.
How do you feel about it now?
They threw me out of Walmart. I mean, I am not going to do it.
They're not your friends anyway. I mean,
Well, you and I are a lot alike. I sued Natural Grocers because they refused to take my mask or my money when I wouldn't wear a mask at checkout. I didn't win the case because I didn't understand the law well enough at the time. I didn't have the right legal argument. I think I have the right legal argument now. And I wouldn't just sue Natural Grocers, I would sue the city of Idaho Falls and the District 7 Health Department for their part enforcing Natural Grocers.
Other states too. We went through Nevada. We went through Nevada. We stopped to eat at a casino. And they said, you cannot come in this casino without a mask. I said, I'm not wearing a mask. I walked through the entire place. The entire place stared at me. We sat down to eat. My husband has a mask on. I'm sorry, I'm not doing it.
I refuse.
If you don't want to feed me, don't feed me, but I'll walk where I want. And I went back out. I mean, and what are you going to do? You're going to call the cops? Fine, call the cops.
They did call the cops on me.
They did not.
They called the cops on me.
Oh, they did not mean.
Well, but the question is, now I don't want to get too distracted because there's some really important points I want to talk here. Thank you for what you brought up, okay? So hold your comments, please. Let's move on here. So how much is freedom worth to you?
I'd rather be dead.
We
Dead
talk-
anyway.
We talk about freedom and how precious it is. What is the price of freedom? It's called eternal vigilance, right? Isn't that, who was it that said that? Thomas Paine or Ben Franklin, somebody, I don't remember now. The price is eternal vigilance. Okay, so let me show you, and if you can read this. Now, this is what I did today. You were talking about precinct committee officers this morning, and I found out that I ran for PCO, and nobody ran against me, so I got in. Okay, so tomorrow night they're going to they sent me a notice and said you have to take an oath of office. What? For a Republican Party precinct committee officer? What is this? So that raised a question in my mind that said, is this a state office or is this a Republican committee officer? So I sent an email that said, please send me the oath of office so that I can find out if I can take that oath. Right? Do I want to know what oath they're going to ask me to take? Absolutely. So I was okay with that. They sent me, it was 59401, I think is the title. Idaho Code 59401, and I'm thinking to myself, what the hell does the Idaho Code have to do with the Republican Party? Is the Republican Party a function of government? You tell me. No. I don't have any problem subscribing to an affirmation. I don't take oaths. I take affirmation. And under Idaho law, if they ask you to take an oath, whether it's getting on a witness stand in a court or any other kind of an oath, you can do what's called an affirmation. Because under the Bible it says, you shall not take an oath. Right? Isn't that what it says? That is what it says. Okay, so you can do an affirmation. So, anyways, today I prepared a declaration of status, an affirmation of Dennis Ray Marsden, that I am a man, and I, upon acceptance of the office of Precinct Committee Officer, Precinct 14, Bonneville County, blah, 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 I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States of America and the Constitution of Idaho, both being subject to natural law. Has the federal Constitution ever violated natural law? That's not a trick question. The answer is yes. Because the federal Constitution allowed for slavery. It was written into the federal Constitution that slaves could be held for like up to 1820 or 1810 or something like that. I don't remember the exact year. It still provided for the importation of slaves. Did that violate natural law? Absolutely, yes. So, I qualified my commitment to the Constitution that it must be subject to natural law. Now, I prepared that today, and tomorrow I'm going to go in and have it notarized, and I'm going to take it to the chairman of the Bonneville County GOP committee, and I'm going to give it to him so that when I take that affirmation tomorrow night, I have qualified my affirmation, okay? And it goes on and explains other things. This is another act of defiance. That I'm not allowing them to presume certain things about my status, my lawful status, that I don't agree to. And this is something I do whenever I enter into any kind of legal contract with the state. This is how it's done, okay? Now, this one I tailored specifically for this particular act. There's other things you can do as well, okay? But this is just to give you an example. Garth Gaylord did it by not wearing a mask into the courthouse. Sarah Brady did it by going to the park. And when they told her to leave, she said, well, you're violating my rights. I'm not trespassing here. Okay? Rosa Parks did it by sitting down on a bus at the front of the bus, sitting down on a seat. Okay? Now, this is a paper defiance, and you can do paper defiance all the time. You want to make sure that you understand the terms that you're using, so that when you say I'm doing this under penalty of perjury, they can't prosecute you for perjury. You need to make sure you know what you're saying. So it means you have to become somewhat conversant in the law. You don't have to become a professor, but anybody can do this. Okay? Everybody in this room has something that you're an expert at. Whether it's running a business, or it's being a nuclear engineer, or being an herbalist, or a computer expert. You know, everybody in here has things that you're good at. You can learn how to do this. And we're talking about our freedoms. How important are your freedoms? Right? Now, you can't be lazy and do it. It means you have to do some study. Okay? But you can do it. I promise you. Yes?
Because the oath to become a PCO, asking for fidelity to the Republican Party then?
No, it really wasn't, but that wasn't the point. What I didn't want them to do was, because here's the problem that I had with the oath. It wasn't that I had any problem taking the oath, because the oath just simply says that I will protect, I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States of America and of the state of Idaho. I have no problem with that. What I have a problem with is that it came by way of the statute. I have no obligation to comply with Title 59 of the Idaho Code. It is beyond, it subjects me to nothing.
Who wrote that?
Well, the Idaho legislature. And it's part of why we have a two-party system. Is if the Idaho legislature controls the two parties, do we really have free elections?
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Right? So what I am doing here, if you look here on this line right here, I declare upon accepting and exercising the duties of the office of Precinct Committee Officer that I retain all my rights and waive none. I forbid any presumption contrary to my declared status stated in this document. Do you know that the statutes of the state of Idaho are presumed to be constitutional? What does that mean?
Maybe.
That's true. And that's true of federal law too. Federal statutes are presumed to be constitutional. And we're going to get to that in just a minute. They have the presumption of constitutionality. So, rights are not, this is taken from McAllister versus Hankel. This is a 1906 case, and it was restated in U.S. versus Johnson in 1947. Rights are not available to the passive man, nor the person who is ignorant of his rights. Rights can be retained only by sustained combat. Rights are acknowledged only when insisted upon by a belligerent claimant in person. One who is persuaded to surrender his rights simply loses his rights. So if you're a sheeple and you just sit on the pew like everybody else did in the courthouse, you have no rights. The only one that had a right there was Garth Gaylord, because he knew his rights and he asserted it. He was the belligerent person, claimant person. So one who is persuaded to surrender his rights simply loses his rights. He does not resist. He acquiesced. Okay? So Idaho citizenship, the common law man. So we have what is called natural law. Natural law is natural. It's common sense. I have a right to work for a living. I have a right to claim property to live on. I may have to buy it. I may have to go in, like during the 1870 or whenever the land grabs took place, and the pioneers or the frontiersmen went into a place and they claimed a plot of land under the what were they called? The patent? It was under the land grants. Under the land grants. So, and I have a right to work, and I have a right to exchange my labor for somebody else's property, whether it's money or whether it's a barter. Okay, they give me something in exchange. It's food. And I also have a right to defend my property and my life, right? And I have a right to defend my rights, which is what Garth Gaylord did and what Sarah Brady did. I have a right to defend myself, okay? So that's called natural law. Then we had Thomas Jefferson comes along in 1776, and he writes this remarkable document called the Declaration of Independence. And I didn't practice this before I came. We hold that all men are created equal. Help me with it.
Oh, you know the thing.
Yeah. You know the thing. You know the thing.
All men are created equal, and we
Guaranteed
okay.
certain unalienable
Have
rights,
certain
among which are
unalienable rights, among which are the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Those are natural rights. And it's natural law that you have the right to exercise those rights. That's natural law. So along comes Thomas Jefferson, and he coins that in the Declaration, didn't he? And then along a few years later comes along the Constitution, the federal Constitution. So that was 1776. 1787, 11 years later, the Articles of Confederation weren't working. It didn't empower the federal government enough to do the job that they were created to do. So, but now the Declaration of Independence doesn't say, the Constitution doesn't have in it the terms that we found in the Declaration of Independence that were so precious to us. Precious to us. The right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, right? Is that precious? But it's not in the Constitution. So along comes the Idaho Constitution. And this is really an undervalued asset, guys. I'm telling you. Because guess what we find in the Idaho Constitution? We find the Bill of Rights. It's not called the Bill of Rights there. It's called the Declaration of Rights. And it didn't start in Idaho. It started in Massachusetts, I think in 1780, 4 years after the Declaration was written and after we declared independence from England. So, these laws are what we call organic law, and it encompasses the common law. And there's another thing that falls into the common law we'll get to in just a moment. But then, on top of that, so we have the common law, we have organic law, and that's what our Constitution is. It's the rule of law. That's why it's so important. And we so overlook the Idaho Constitution. It is so critical to our rights. Now, the statutes are called civil law, and it comes from the Roman civil law. It came from Rome. The Romans didn't have a constitution. They had a senate or whatever it was called, and they wrote ordinances and codes. They wrote the laws, what they thought was best. Okay? In America, our legislatures write the laws, what they think is best, but what does it have to comply with? It has to comply with the Constitution. If it violates the Constitution, it's void from the day it's written. Now, Rosa Parks was supposed to sit on the back of the bus or give up her seat, right? And they had a state law that said she had to do that. I don't know when they wrote that law. Maybe it was 1920. Maybe it was 1930. I don't know. But the Supreme Court said that law was void from the day it was written.
Because it was unconstitutional.
Because it violated natural law. It was discriminatory. Okay, so now along come court decisions. And you'll see that court decisions fall in that same bracket under organic law and common law. Court cases are part of the common law. And even today, when there are cases that deal with organic constitutional law, our courts look back to Old England. They go back to the old cases in England. In fact, you know the Heller case. How many of you have heard of the Heller case? It's a Second Amendment case. It was a big one. It was a big win for Second Amendment rights. That case went back to England and looked at the English Bill of Rights from like 1669 or 79 or something like that. It went clear back into the 1600s to look at the British common law. Common law, we're still looking at British common law today. All right, I kind of got off a little bit there. But, so, organic law, common law, and the courts, okay? So, how we doing? Anybody want to stand up for a second? Are we covering a lot of material? Everybody comfortable? Move on ahead. Take a breather. All right. So we have Congress up above, and we have the Idaho legislature down below. And these guys are passing statutes for everybody in this room, or at least that's what we think. That's what we've been told, that everything they pass is a law for you. I'm telling you, it isn't. Necessarily. Not necessarily. Okay? He who pays the piper picks the song. If you're taking money from the state of Idaho, then they have some control over how you use the money. If you're taking money from the federal government, they have some control over how you use the money. They have control over the state of Idaho, how they use the money. And that's why taking grants and money from the federal government violates our Idaho sovereignty. Not because they're taking it away, but because they're buying it. And you have a choice in your personal life whether you take that money or not. So, we have the Congress and the Idaho legislature, they're passing laws, they're passing statutes, right? Okay? And we think that all of those apply to us, to me. The crowd votes, hoping for change. We just went through it. We just went through the vote. Okay, this back to Einstein again. We keep doing the same thing, expecting new results. That's insanity. Let's give you a way out of insanity, okay? The crowd begs for reform. Again, you remember the guy bowing down to the king, begging for mercy, okay? Let's quit begging for mercy. Let's do something about it. So here's one guy, he walks away from the crowd. Everybody in the room, or everybody in Idaho, believes that they passed a statute mandating that you had to wear masks, or you had to get a vaccine, or whatever. They thought that if you walked into Natural Grocers without a mask, they could call the police and have you arrested. Okay? Or Garth, don't come into the courthouse without a mask on. Okay? Somebody has to step away from the crowd. But what if the whole crowd joins that person, or at least enough of a number that they can't be controlled, okay? So one man steps away to the crowd, the man asserts his rights and establishes liberty. Is how it's done. Some of it, like I said earlier, you do by simply writing a letter, signing an affidavit. Okay, signing an affidavit under penalty of perjury. Some of this you can do with the simplicity of a letter. Okay? So, this is called the rule of law. We are forcing the rule of law. The legislature can pass rules, and we can defy them when they violate our rights. You have a right to violate laws that violate your rights. You have a right to do that. I don't know if I've got the court cases in this presentation, but I can show you the court cases that show you can do that.
Would you say we have a responsibility
I
to
think
do
you do.
that?
Yeah, yeah. When tyranny becomes the rule, defiance becomes the duty. Yeah, it's something like that, I'm paraphrasing. Okay, very good. So, Henry David Thoreau thought of himself as something of a socialist, maybe, but I don't care where the source of the truth comes from, if what he said is true. Henry David Thoreau said in Civil Disobedience, he called it, which was great. That was a great title for his book. Any man more right than his neighbors constitutes a majority of one. Right? Right? Okay, so one person can do this. Sarah Brady did it, Garth did it. Okay. So, when we go to the legislature for a solution, we're asking the legislature to give us a fish. Right? That's called dependence. That's called dependence. Teach a man to fish, and he eats for a lifetime. Well, that's what we're talking about here. Learn what your rights are, learn how to assert your rights, and learn to avoid letting the government deceive you into surrendering your rights. That's what this is about tonight. Okay? Okay, Idaho. This is the state of Idaho. But I don't like it all capitalized. Typically, all capitalized refers to a corporate state of Idaho. Okay? So I'm going to spell it the way it should be spelled. If you go to the Enabling Act that created the state of Idaho, it's number 656. It's the Act of Congress 656. It was written in 1890. The word Idaho is not all caps. And if you go to the Idaho Constitution, it's not in all caps either. Okay. It's Idaho, capital I, capital lowercase d-a-h-o. Okay, so we got one guy here, an Idahoan. He's an Idaho citizen, as opposed to a U.S. citizen. When you fill out a driver's license application, does it ask you if you're an Idaho citizen? It asks if you're a U.S. citizen. And it also asks if you're a resident of the state of Idaho. I am not a resident of the state of Idaho. I am domiciled in Idaho. Okay, there's a difference. The words that you pick, and tonight isn't a night to get into the details on that, but the words that you pick and choose to describe yourself matter. Okay? I'm an Idaho citizen. I am domiciled in Idaho. Domicile means permanent inhabitant. Resident means a temporary inhabitant that has a permanent domicile somewhere else. Where do you think that permanent domicile is claimed to be by a U.S. citizen? Somewhere in the jurisdiction of the U.S. government, not the Idaho Republic. So I just want to touch on that just briefly. The words that we use, so it takes study to understand this. The words that we use affect our legal standing. Okay? So here we have
we're a resident of wherever we reside. Right? I mean, you reside.
You hang on to those questions. Those are great questions to have. There is a legal distinction between residency and domicile. Domicile is the place of your permanent home where you intend to return if you travel somewhere else. That's a domicile. Residency is a temporary place of abode. It's temporary, and it presumes that you have some other place that you claim as your domicile. Domicile is where your political status is established, not in residency. So, I'm not going to go into a big explanation on that tonight, but we can address that later. So, what we've got here is the Idaho citizen is protected by natural law, and that natural law is protected by the Idaho Constitution, and the Idaho Constitution contains the Bill of Rights. It's what protects your Bill of Rights. We call it a Declaration of Rights. Okay, it's called a Declaration of Rights. So, the rule of law, we have the man that asserts his rights. He walks away from the crowd, but all the crowd and the people of Idaho. Now, the people here, you'll see the United States underneath that. Most of these people, when you filled out your driver's license application and your voter application, and anything else you fill out with the state of Idaho, it always asks you, are you a U.S. citizen? And when you say every time you agree to that, what you're doing is you're applying to U.S. jurisdiction and not to Idaho jurisdiction. That's the problem. Again, I challenge you to question what I'm saying and do your own research. And I'll give you some places to go look for some of these questions. So, Congress and the Idaho legislature passed statutes for the people, and they think they're all U.S. citizens. Are the statutes constitutional? Yes, but, and this is where I was going earlier, and this is something that was in our earlier discussion. The improper application of a statute is unconstitutional. I'll give you an example. Here in a minute. So, what happens if all the people leave the crowd and join the one guy that went off by himself? The only people that leaves under the jurisdiction of the state are employees of the state, the military, and officers of the state. So, most of the rules and regulations under Idaho law and under federal law are designed to regulate government. It is not designed to regulate the conduct of the people. What was the Constitution drawn up for? To limit government. The regulations of government are made to regulate government personnel. So, let's talk about this again. Misapplied laws are not laws per se. Executive order mandates are not laws. If you read Title 46 of the Idaho Code, which is the Emergency Powers Act of the Idaho government, when Governor Little was imposing executive order mandates in Idaho, he was taking that authority from Title 46. If you read Title 46, I don't remember the exact section, it says in Title 46 that he had the power to bring together the resources of the state of Idaho for the purpose of combating COVID. That's what it said. It doesn't say anywhere in there that he had the power to regulate my conduct or your conduct. And that includes putting on a mask. When you hear an order from the government claiming that you have to do something, I challenge you to go to the statute. And you can do this easily. You go to the State of Idaho website and you look under laws. It'll have the statute or the Idaho Code, and it'll have them listed, and it's kind of, I'm going to tell you, it's kind of grueling the first time you look at it. There's 74 titles in the Idaho Code. You've got the courts, you've got health and welfare, you've got the militia, you've got education, you've got, I mean, it's 74, you know, get yourself ready because you're going to spend some time trudging through some of it. Or you can do a Google search sometimes and you can look up Emergency Powers Act, Idaho Code, and it'll take you and give you a reference. So you can do Google searches on that, but you have to become a little bit familiar. When they tell you a statute that is ordering you to put on a mask, look at the code. Go see what it says. The governor had no power to tell you to put on a mask. So, a misapplied law is not a law, per se. A misapplied law is a violation of your constitutional rights. Poindexter versus Greenough, this is an 1885 case. This is shortly after the Civil War, well, what, 20 years, 25 years, something like that. 20 years, I guess, a little less. Poindexter versus Greenough. This was a tax law, and I don't remember the state this was in, but they had passed it as a property tax law. The statute in question is not necessarily void. A couple of negatives there. Okay? The statute in question it means it could be void though, right? If it violates the Constitution, it's void. But it's saying it isn't necessarily void. But the statute is challenged. Somebody is challenging the validity of this act because its application is a violation of a constitutional right. So it means generally it may be constitutional, right? You follow me there? But in your case it may not be. Or it may be, in most of our cases it may not be. It may be that it only applies to one or two people, depending on their legal status. Many of the laws of a state, this is a U.S. Supreme Court case, okay? Part of the common law. Many of the laws of a state which are valid may be void in particular cases because they deprive the man or woman of a right secured to him by the Constitution of the United States. Anybody have a question about that? Do you understand how significant that statement is? That a law can be constitutional, but in its application against you, it isn't. Okay? And the face mask is a good example of that. Can the governor demand that the employees of the state wear the face mask? Maybe. I'm not sure he can, but maybe. Okay? Somebody has to stand up like Sarah Brady and say no to find out. We have to get it into the court. Okay? The statutes are presumed to be valid until challenged. So, the law may be valid, but it may not apply to me. So, the Idaho Constitution Declaration of Rights. Okay? The Bill of Rights, now in Idaho we call it the Declaration of Rights. The Bill of Rights is not a Bill of Privileges. What's the difference between a privilege and a right?
A right comes,
A privilege can be taken away.
and a right comes from God.
A right comes from God or from nature, either way you want to call it. So Thomas Jefferson called it nature's God, is the term he used for it. Okay? Nature or nature's God. Okay? A privilege is the power to do something that you don't otherwise have a right to do. Okay? For example, be the President of the United States. Do you have a right to be the President of the United States? No. You have a right to run for President, but you don't have a right to be President. Okay? It's a privilege. Okay? Or, do you have the right to be a tax collector? No. You don't. And there's other things, but that's probably enough to cover it. Okay? So, the Bill of Rights in the U.S. Constitution was ratified in 1791. The Constitution was written in 1787. It was 4 years later before the Bill of Rights came along. So the Bill of Rights were not included in the original Constitution. What happened was the citizens of the states saw that they were protected in their own states from their own government, their own state government, and they already had constitutions. In fact, Massachusetts had one in 1780, and it had a Declaration of Rights in it. In fact, the Bill of Rights is taken from some of those models of state constitutions. In 1780, they had the Massachusetts Bill of Rights. We didn't have one in the federal government until 1791. It was added to protect state citizens. It was the citizens of the states, the 13 states, that got sitting back and thinking, hold it, we have these protections from our own state governments, but we've got a federal government out there that we don't trust, right? They didn't trust them, and they had good reason not to trust them. So they drafted a Bill of Rights. Rights are secured to you by the Idaho Constitution. There was a case in 1875, just a few years after the Civil War, United States versus Cruikshank, that said that the Bill of Rights was secured to state citizens by the state constitution. And that was reiterated again in 1967 in Katz versus United States. And check these out. These are important cases. If you want to secure your Bill of Rights, you do it as a state citizen. So, Declarations of Rights, Article 1 of the Idaho Constitution. We won't go into much of this, we'll skip some of this, but Section 1. In fact, how many of you have your Idaho Constitutions tonight? You got yours here? Would you like to read Article 1? Article 1, Section 1, if you've got it. Okay, it's the very first paragraph in the Idaho Constitution. It's the very first. Here you go.
Article 1, Declaration of Rights. This commission, Section 1, inalienable rights of man.
Closer to your mouth.
All men are by nature free and equal, and have certain inalienable rights, among which are enjoyed and defended life and liberty, acquiring, possessing, and protecting property, pursuing happiness, and securing safety.
Does that sound like the Declaration of Independence? It's not in the federal Constitution. Go look, it's not there. Now, the Declaration of Independence is the spirit of the law. The Constitution is the letter of the law. And the courts have said that. The courts have said that. But you have, in the Idaho Constitution, Thomas Jefferson's statement, almost verbatim. Okay? All right. The Idaho Constitution is our path to liberty. So, this is the index of the Idaho Constitution. You can see the Declaration of Rights is Article 1. And it was considered the most important statement in the Idaho Constitution. You can see that if you look over here to, on the second column, fourth one down, there's the militia. That's the Emergency Powers Act is under the militia. That's where Governor Little got the authority to shut down the state. But he didn't get the authority there, did he? The title says, Title 46 says that he can invoke a 30-day emergency state of emergency, and can renew it once. He didn't get the authority from it to do it 25 times, 26 times, whatever it was. Okay.
What's the number in parentheses?
Yeah.
What's that number in parentheses?
Oh, that's the number of words in it. That was to give you a feel for how much work they went to on each of those sections. There's 1,900 words of the Declaration of Rights, and you can see that I find it really interesting. If you look down about number 8 there, public indebtedness and subsidies is 3,400 words. And You know, I haven't studied that in detail, but if you have an interest in a particular area of law, you need to go study that particular area of law and find out what the details are that limits our government and see if they're violating those limits. That's what you need to do. That's how we do this, okay? Become an expert in the Idaho Constitution.
There's an interesting order in the departments also.
Yeah.
The legislature, which is the people, representatives is first.
Yeah. Good point. So, those were just some things that sometimes I talk about here. Anyway, why does the Idaho Declaration of Rights and Idaho citizenship matter? Because Congress has no authority. I'm talking about the United States Congress. The U.S. Congress has no authority to operate in domestic matters inside the state of Idaho. They have no authority. The only way they can breach or break through that limitation is by offering money, by either extorting compliance or by bribing compliance. That's the only way. And it isn't just in the state of Idaho that operates. It operates on us individually too. It's the same thing. Okay? So, it has no authority unless you consent by contract to federal jurisdiction. We do that when you fill out a passport. In fact, I just filled out a renewal application for a passport. And what I did for that is I did another document similar to the one I did for the PCOs. I did a similar document to that says I am applying for a passport as an Idaho citizen and not as a territorial or municipal citizen, as a citizen of the territorial or municipal United States, because that's a different jurisdiction. And it has nothing to do with me. Voter registration, when you fill it out as a U.S. citizen. When I did that, it took me 90 days to jump through the hoops to get the Secretary of State to finally say, we will accept your declaration of status as an Idaho citizen to vote. But he did. It takes some determination, and it takes a little bit of patience, and it takes a little bit of advanced planning. It took me 90 days, and finally the Secretary of State came back and said, we will recognize your status as an Idaho citizen to vote in an Idaho election. Now that's my kind of defiance. It's safe, and if I'm wrong, I challenge them. Prove to me where I'm wrong. And it took 3 exchanges of letters to get their final acknowledgement that I was going to vote as an Idaho citizen and not as a U.S. citizen.
Is that what the federal election?
That was a federal election. Yeah. Because in reality, when I'm voting as an Idaho citizen, what I'm voting for is not for the president himself. It's an indirect election. I am voting for the Electoral College, how they're going to cast the vote, right? Yeah. That's inside of Idaho. It's not federal. Right? All right. So you get a driver's license. They ask if you're an Idaho resident. I'm not a resident of Idaho. I am domiciled in Idaho. Okay, now you're hearing me repeat a few things. I'm doing that for your benefit, that you understand that the words you use matter. And you can learn this. You can learn it, okay? Social Security number, U.S. citizen. It is presumed that you're a U.S. citizen. I believe aliens can get Social Security numbers now too, but anyway. A resident, by the way, the word resident means that you are a foreign national. It means that you came from some other location and that you are residing temporarily in a place. You don't need to worry about this unless you're going to do it and study it and do something about it, okay? So, why does it matter again? Because the state of Idaho has no authority to regulate your private conduct either. Just as the federal government has no right to regulate your conduct or to regulate domestic matters inside the state of Idaho. Idaho is a sovereign state. You've heard that. We are a sovereign state, but we can relinquish our sovereignty by contract. And you can relinquish your liberties by contract. So you have to know how those contracts operate. Okay, that's another discussion. That's a different discussion. So, unless you consent by contract to state jurisdiction. That's how that happens. You consent to it, okay? We do that through state subsidies and aid, through driver's license application, through the marriage license application. Huh. Why does the state have authority to come in and take children out of a home? Because you have a three-way agreement with the state. You and your spouse had an agreement, and the state is the senior party to that agreement because you got an application. Do you have the right to marry without a license from the state? You bet you do. It's a common law right. Now, in Idaho, back in about 1995, they passed a law that said the state of Idaho does not recognize common law marriages. Now, common law marriage doesn't mean just cohabitating for 7 years. A common law marriage is where two people make an agreement, whether they put it on writing or not, they make an agreement and they let the community know that they're married. We are husband and wife. They didn't need to have any kind of relationship prior to that. Any living, cohabitating, it's irrelevant. But the state recognizes it as common law if they've been together for 7 years and have put forward to other people that they're husband and wife. That one is automatic. But you can do it on your own without an automatic. You can trigger your own marriage agreement on your own. Do you have to have the state's permission to marry somebody? Do you know that marriage licenses came about back in about 1920, 1930? They were not common before that. And prior to that period, they were only used for interracial marriages. They changed that in about 1920, 1930, 1940, in that period. And all the states adopted this common civil marriage practice. So, maybe that's news to you. Okay, when you get corporate status, you are asking the state to give your company limited liability. Under the common law, we have what is called strict liability. In other words, if we hurt somebody, we are completely liable to make them whole again, okay, by our negligence or by intent, whatever the case may be. But under civil law, for commercial reasons, and I'm telling you, commerce runs our laws. And I think it's wrong. I know it's wrong. Commerce runs our laws, okay? Limited liability. Limited liability is your company acts as though it's another person. We can't see it, it has a name on it, and we've got 5 owners that have stock in it, and we control it. We own the stock, but the company acts as a separate legal person, and the state recognizes it as such. Because the state grants this limited liability means if that person, that artificial person over here, this corporation, causes damage to somebody, they can sue the corporation, but they can't come after me as an individual, as a private man over here. The liability stops with the assets of the corporation. That's called limited liability. And because the state grants limited liability on the corporation, the state has the right to regulate it. The state doesn't have the right to regulate me. But I'm held strictly liable for my actions. That's the difference. Okay? That's corporate status. So the states got together in 1776, and Idaho was here, it just wasn't part of the Union, right? Okay, so the states got together and they said, we want a federal government. And they had good reason for it, but I only have a couple of those. I only have one of those states here, actually. But it applies. Idaho, when the act was passed in 1890 to create Idaho, do you know Idaho was put on the same footing as the original 13 states? It has the exact same legal lawful standing, exactly. So, these states created a federal government for the purpose of serving the purposes of the Union, okay? But we wrote this Constitution that barred that federal government in place. That's what the Constitution's all about. And it protected the states, including Idaho, and it protected the individuals. So Congress and Idaho writes statutes and we've got this guy and everybody that joined him asserting their rights over here. These are Idaho citizens who walked away from the crowd, okay? And they're governed by the rule of law. And so the improper application of a statute is unconstitutional. The way that the government gets around its limitations that we just showed in the previous slide is through federal franchises. Your Social Security number is a federal franchise. Okay? It's optional. How many of you have got a Social Security number before the age of 18? Raise your hand. Anybody here not get one before age 18? Really? Got it later? Any others? Got it later? Do you know if you buy a car on credit at age 17 and they extend credit to you and you get that car, when you turn 18 you become of legal age, you can rescind contract. Did you know that? Because a 17-year-old doesn't have legal capacity to enter into a contract. That's right? Everybody know that? You're a minor. So when you become 18 years of age, you can cancel the contract. Can you keep the car? No. No, you can't keep the benefit when you terminate the contract. But if you entered into I entered into one at age 15, and I rescinded my Social Security number. Okay, several years ago, I rescinded it. There's a way to do that, and it's because a contract entered into without capacity is a voidable contract. Okay, or if you were led to believe that it was required of law, that's fraud. Or at the very least, it's what's called constructive fraud. Fraud is representing or deceiving somebody into entering into a contract, and you rely upon that lie. That's relying upon the lie. That is a voidable contract. You can void that contract. Okay? So federal employment. Now, if a person goes to work in Washington, D.C. as a federal employee, they are subject to congressional regulation. But when they leave that job and they move back to Idaho, they leave that jurisdiction. A federal officer or a federal appointee is subject to congressional regulation. Federal money, federal subsidies subject you to federal regulation.
So if you took COVID payments, they can make you wear a mask.
That's correct. In fact, in the agreement itself, it says that whoever takes the money will enforce executive orders. This is exactly what it said. Yeah. So ignorance of contract, mistake of law, all of these things can cause you to believe that you're subject to a law that you are not subject to. All of those become voidable. Okay, statutory U.S. citizens abandon their rights unknowingly. When you claim U.S. citizenship, you are abandoning your Bill of Rights protections. Okay?
Wow.
Unless you know how to describe it properly. Okay? This is Katz versus U.S. 1967. The protection of a person's right to privacy is like the protection of his property and of his life, left largely to the law of the individual states. Okay? You can correct your status. So when we're talking about U.S. citizenship versus Idaho citizen, we're talking about what we call status. It's called your legal status. And how the state recognizes you as being subject to their jurisdiction or not. Contracts entered into without full disclosure and without capacity are voidable. So we've been talking about voting. There on the right, we just spent going through the primaries, and again, we found a lot of good community, and we have had some disappointments. Or we're hiring attorneys to solve our problems. Sarah Brady talked about spending $20,000 to defend a trespass charge at a playground. Isn't that sad?
She wasn't even done yet.
And she wasn't even done yet. So for those of you that are interested, there is a website that actually teaches you how to litigate your own case. And now that's kind of an arm of this, what I'm telling you about tonight. There's a website called howtowinincourt.com. Or you can look it up under jurisdictionary.com. But how to win, and there's a lawyer who retired from practice and is actually teaching people how to defend themselves pro se. It's not free, but it's, in my opinion, it's pretty cheap. It's $250 to join, and it's $89 a year to renew for a membership of it. I'm very impressed with it. He teaches you how to be confident in defending your rights, how to walk into a court of law if necessary, and how to defend yourself. It's very, very well written, or very well produced. Again, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, but expecting different results. Albert Einstein. So do it yourselves. A lot of lawyers are out there doing it just as a money machine. A lawyer doesn't make any money unless he can bill you for his hours. In most cases, a lawyer could win, from what I've studied and what I've seen, in 90% of the time, they could win a case at preliminary hearing. But there's no money to be made at preliminary hearing. The money is made in discovery, in doing depositions, interrogatories, and having multiple hearings. The money is made by billable hours. You can do better on your own in most cases. Okay?
They're feeding the monster.
Say what?
They're feeding the monster.
Yeah, and you're feeding the monster. I'm telling you. So, the trick here is if I have a pile of dirt, well, as a kid we were pushing manure sometimes. I lived on a farm. You want to pick the right tool. So you know, only one or two of those tools are going to work there for that job. So when we look to the federal Constitution in Title 42, now, during this COVID nonsense, everybody was filing civil rights actions under Title 42. They're on the left-hand side of the deal. Title 42 is the protections of civil rights. Minorities, gender-related, age-related, what have you. Those are all under Title 42 of the U.S. Code. And almost everything that I saw being filed where people were defying government orders, they were filing it under Title 42. How many of those cases won? That I found about that many. Okay, very, very few. There was a case out of Florida that was filed by a guy, and he argued it under state constitutional protections. He did it as a state citizen, and he won. Now, he didn't win a trial, and often you won't win a trial because the state, the district courts, when they're looking at a constitutional question, they will often rule against the belligerent claimant in person. And if Rosa Parks as an example, for example, she lost in the district court, she lost in the state appeals court, she lost in the state Supreme Court, she lost in the federal district court. The only court she won in was the only one that mattered, the Supreme Court. And that's often what happens when you're talking a constitutional right. It has to go to appeal. The guy in Florida that did it over the mask mandate had to go to appeal, but he won at the state appeal court based on constitutional argument. He won it not on a statute. If you're relying on the statute, you're in trouble. You need to rely on the constitutional argument, and you can learn more about that. Okay? So, the privilege. Now, we're out of time.
No, you're fine.
Are we okay?
Yeah, you're fine.
All right. We're close. We're on frame 40 of 47. Okay? The Privileges and Immunities Clause of the 14th Amendment protects very few rights. The 14th Amendment. The 14th Amendment is due process and protection of rights that extended those protections against state governments. Because after the Civil War, the slaves had been freed, and we had the 13th Amendment that did away with slavery, right? But the states weren't observing it. They were refusing to recognize the freed slaves as citizens of their states, which they had a right to do, because this is the federal government. States are sovereign. That's a catch-22. The states were sovereign in this matter. So, the federal government created a new kind of citizenship. It was called federal U.S. citizenship, and it's part of the 14th Amendment. Okay? So, the Privilege and Immunity Clause of the 14th Amendment protects very few rights because it does not incorporate any of the Bill of Rights, nor protect all rights of individual citizens. Instead, the 14th Amendment protects only those rights which are peculiar to being a citizen of the federal government. If you were a state citizen, this didn't add anything to you. The 14th Amendment did not, just like the 16th Amendment didn't create any new taxing law. You got to go look at the case law on this. You think when they passed the 16th Amendment, which is the income tax amendment, people think, well, that created new taxing power. You go read the case law on it, and the case law all says that there was no new taxing power created. That's a little bit different discussion, but anyways, it does not protect those rights which relate to state citizenship. So, privileges and immunities are for those people that want the state to take care of them. U.S. citizens. Idaho citizens have rights. State citizens have rights, and they're protected under the state constitution. This is not a collective choice. Just because everybody else in Idaho Falls or in Idaho chooses to define themselves as a U.S. citizen doesn't mean I have to. It is an individual choice. It is not a collective choice. Okay? I'm just going to jump through some of this. I think we've covered a lot of stuff. Anyway, pick your words carefully. Well, let me just look at this briefly and just show you real quickly here. Just a couple. For instance, the civil law, what is called a word of art or a term of art, a U.S. citizen is different than a citizen of Idaho. An Idaho citizen is preferred status. You could be an American national or an American state national or a constitutional citizen or a citizen of the constitutional United States of America. Of America. Let's add that in there because it needs to be there. A resident is a term that refers to a resident alien, somebody that has come from some other place that claims a domicile foreign to where you're living. Domiciled on the soil. When I write a document that identifies me, I call myself an Idaho citizen, and I am domiciled on the land of Idaho. Not in the state of Idaho, because the state of Idaho, let's see here. This term right here, state of Idaho, is a corporate entity. It's an artificial corporation. It is the agent of we the people. Okay? It is organized to administer the functions of government. It's a corporation. Idaho is the organic state, defined by our borders and by our ground under our feet. When I get a privilege, it means that the state has given me something that I don't have an absolute right to. A benefit from the government, a license from the government, a grant. Over here I have liberty and I have rights. A car certificate of title isn't a title, it's a certificate of title. As opposed to an absolute title. When you surrender, when your car comes into the state, the dealership receives what's called a certificate of origin or a certificate of manufacturer certificate, something like that. The state surrenders that certificate, or the dealer surrenders that certificate to the state, and the state takes possession of it. Why don't they give it to you? Because you don't have absolute title to it. They give you what is called a equitable title. They give you a certificate of title that gives evidence of your equitable interest in it. And that's why every time that car sells, the state has a claim to sales tax on it. Isn't that strange?
And every time you resell it, it gets...
Every time it resells, they have a claim on, it's a transfer. It's a privilege. It's a transfer privilege that occurs. So, when you get a marriage license, you're referred to as a parent or the guardian. And in fact, when you have divorce decrees, they set up by contract, the court has jurisdiction because you granted jurisdiction. And if they don't like what's going on in the home, they can come in and take the children out of the home. It's because of the marriage license. And the birth certificate. The birth certificate is a bill of lading. The delivery is a commercial transaction. I'm delivering. And who does the delivery? A licensed professional. So, if you read the Second Amendment, it talks about arms. It doesn't talk about firearms. This is more general. It's broader. This is more defined, and it's defined in the statutes. So when people go to argue the statutes, why would you restrict your right by arguing the statute when you can broaden your rights under the amendment, under the Constitution? So, what we've created is a ward guardian relationship with the state. Cradle to grave, state-run socialism. Now that's a philosophical discussion, but it's a reality that we're operating in a guardian-ward relationship with the state. And we do it through licensing. So, when I talk, I avoid these terms here. I avoid the term resident. I avoid the term citizen of the state of Idaho. I don't have privileges, and I don't want privileges. And you saw my document that I said regarding the PCO affirmation. So, what I do is up front, I reserve my rights, and I challenge the state to have the ability to presume otherwise. Because they do presume all of these things unless you say otherwise. When you say you're a U.S. citizen, it is a presumption of the state, it is a presumption of the statute, it is the presumption of the court that you are subject by way of U.S. citizenship. So pick your words carefully, learn the language of the common law. I don't know what happened there. Let's try this. Pick your tools carefully. We've covered a lot of stuff. I'm not going to get into U.S. citizenship. There are 3 different definitions of the United States. I'm just going to leave it at that tonight. We've covered a lot of ground. There was a court case, there's a couple of court cases. At the bottom there, you can see Hooven versus Evatt, which was a 1945 case, and Downs versus Bidwell, which was a 1901 case. And the Supreme Court said, when you use the word United States, it can mean 3 different jurisdictions. Okay? So, again, I'm not spend a lot of time on that tonight. Are you a U.S. citizen? When it asks that of you on your license application, okay. Which one?
Good evening, folks.
Okay, we're going to end with this last thought. Henry Ford said, "Thinking is the hardest work there is, which is the reason so few engage in it." We have covered a lot of material tonight. You've been really a good audience. Thank you for your attention. There are wonderful resources available, and I didn't make up anything on that tonight. I usually have a handout. I didn't think of it. But anyways, I appreciate your attentiveness. Thank you.